Thank you for joining me and my guests on About Fundraising the Podcast. I'm Diana Marquis, host of About Fundraising the Podcast and founder and chief strategist for DM Group Consulting. DM Group Consulting works with nonprofit organizations on fundraising strategies, grant submissions, database analysis, and board training. Give me a call or send me an email to schedule your free half-hour consultation. My team and I are here to help you and your organization thrive. Rhonda Aghamalian is a native of the DFW area and lifelong resident. She has built a successful career spanning more than 25 years in marketing communications, public relations, and freelance writing. A dedicated volunteer, Rhonda is currently in her 7th year as a Dallas ISD volunteer, mentoring students at the Irma Rangel Young Women's Leadership Academy. She has also served as a Meals on Wheels holiday driver since 2018. She is a sustaining member of the Junior League of Dallas and a member of the Dallas Preservation Society and the Dallas League of Women Voters. And on top of all of that, she has spent a decade advocating for abused and neglected children through Dallas CASA. Rhonda's interests, when she has a minute, include reading, local history, and urban exploration. My second guest today is Juliette Coulter, who is owner and principal of the Coulter Group, an award-winning public relations firm specializing in media relations, public relations, writing, public affairs, grand openings, trade show press, and event press. They have handled grand openings celebrations for the Margaret Hunt Hill Bridge celebration, Trinity River Audubon Center, Dogwood Canyon Audubon Center, Ronald McDonald House of Dallas, their new house, and the Dallas Arboretum and Botanical Garden. She also launched Lime Scooters in Texas' largest markets. She started her career in Washington, D.C. with Fleischman Hilliard and was one of their first employees in Dallas. She also worked with Rita Cox of Cox Communications and was part of the team that celebrated the opening of the Women's Museum in Fair Park. Juliette, you have a remarkable career and continue to work on many important projects. I don't remember how we first met, but it seems like I've always known who you are, but not always the extent of what you do. So what are you working on these days?
I'm working on a lot of projects. Diana, thank you for having me and Rhonda here. I do think we met through Rosalind Dawson Thompson. That's what I think, but my memory, who knows? Rhonda and I actually work on a couple of accounts together. Texas Women's University, which we are the agency of record working with their advancement and their marketing team, doing lots of fun projects. I also work with Texas Women's Foundation and all the events that they have, as well as their important research that they do in Texas. A new client that we've recently secured is Visit South Padre Island. So they invited us to come and experience the island over spring break, which, as they say, the island is big enough for both families and spring breakers. It is not your typical tagline, but certainly was very fun. I also, our team works with Uptown Dallas, Inc., Spark Dallas, which is a creative space to spark creativity in young children and adults as well, and so many other important clients.
Wow, as always, a very full plate. I guess it was really tough getting down to Padre, right? Just to spend that time down there.
It was so tough. Well, let me tell you, the weather was perfect, and they have so many neat things. They have a sea turtle hospital, and they have the only MRI for sea turtles in the country. Isn't that...
That's interesting.
Very interesting.
That's interesting.
I feel like I'll one day use that to win at Trivial Pursuit.
You will.
Fact, yes.
It'll be a question.
That would be a good one. So, Rhonda, let's start with the basics. Today we're talking about public relations, marketing, and everything related to it that you all know about and I don't. So what is the difference between public relations and marketing?
PR and marketing are different, but they are first cousins. And I would encourage anyone in the nonprofit world to be aware of the distinction, but not to get too worked up about it, because at the end of the day, both of them relate to getting the word out about your organization, your mission, your message, and what the call to action. And they are always going to work in tandem, these two disciplines, but there are differences. Public relations is more about your message and your story, and it also should be about managing your relationships with your audiences. Marketing is more sales oriented and is more about closing the deal, either the direct ask and the path that you're providing for someone to make a donation or to sign up to volunteer or to buy tickets to your event or whatever it is that your call to action is. So, like, for example, if you send out an e-blast, that's a marketing tactic. But the marketing staff member, or if you're lucky enough to have a team, certainly would do well to work with the public relations team member or consultant or the PR team and ask the PR folk to weigh in on the message and the overall feel of your marketing campaign. Similarly, if you are putting out a press release about an upcoming event, that's most definitely a PR tactic. But I think that the wise PR professional in the nonprofit setting is going to work with marketing to find out what it is that at the end of the day we're asking people to do and have that inform the overall pitch and the messaging in your press release.
So, like you said, if we have a special event or something like that, that would be more, well, that would be both because you want to sell tickets, but you also want, My Sweet Charity to say something about it. So even that one event has basically the two first cousins are both working on it.
Absolutely. In larger settings, sometimes PR and marketing can become a little bit separate from each other. And you particularly can see that play out with PR or a Marcom team and the development team, where they won't work together the way they should because they see their objectives as different, or maybe they have the same objective, but they're not clear on how they should work together to achieve that objective. Sometimes that, marketing or development / sales staff will be slow to ask for input from PR or Marcom. And then the other way around, PR and Marcom might not be as mindful as they should be about keeping marketing or sales staff or development staff's objectives in mind too.
Yes, I have been in those situations where there's one side was saying one thing and the other side was saying another to the same audience.
Absolutely. And then when you throw in programming staff, then you've maybe got yet another point of view about what needs to be said. And it's always just incumbent upon the leadership of the various teams as well as the CEO or ED to bring those teams together and create harmony and remind everyone that you don't have anything to sell if there's no programming, but that also we don't have any revenue coming in if there's no fund development, but yet you don't have anyone to deliver the message if there's no PR or Marcom. We're all on the same side. Let's all figure out how to work together.
One of the things that I've run across, even when I was on staff with a nonprofit and even now with my consultancy, is development staff does not always see the benefit of having different messages for their different audiences. And so this kind of like segues into this question that we talked about a little bit earlier. Is everyone your audience, and is everything your story?
Not everything is your story. And just to sort of piggyback on what Rhonda said too, I think how we've looked at it with different clients is it's PESO, P-E-S-O. So paid, P is for paid. That's your advertising. That's your promotions. Those are the things that you buy. in terms of marketing. Earned is your PR, your public relations, your media relations, your earned media, as we call it, which is the value of that is 3 to 5 times what an ad would be. Your shared is your social media, things that you share, and your owned would be the events you're talking about, your messages, your email lists, your website, your prospect list. And so not everything is going to be the most important thing. And I think it's figuring out what is your plan, and what is your objective? What's your goal? What are then your objectives? And then what are the tactics that you use to get to that? And so for each of the PESO, there are different tactics that you would use. But figuring out what your goal is to raise money. Okay, how do we go about raising money? Okay, we are going to have an event like a lot of nonprofits do. Well, is that the most successful thing to have an event, or should you do maybe a donor, a gathering of 10 prospects that would be, coming together, having a dinner, and it's a smaller event where you then share your message and see how that resonates. I mean, there are different ways and that is also, that's more of a marketing / donor cultivation event, but it's still, your messages need to be clear and consistent. So
Consistent, yes, consistent. I use that word a lot in talking with my clients. I like the PESO. That's a good acronym to keep in mind.
PESO and the use of an acronym is a great example, I think, Juliette, of what you need to bear in mind when you're telling your story, which is to create a hook or an angle or something that's easy for people to remember. To go back to your original question, no, not everything is not every chapter in your organization needs to be in the book that you present to the public, and not everyone is your audience. If you're Taco Bell trying to sell tacos, okay, yeah, maybe everybody's your audience because you're looking for an enormous amount of conversions and you're selling to the general public. But you know what? Even Taco Bell has segmentation. I've never worked for them, but I'm pretty sure that they, while their audiences are huge, there are certain populations that they know are not their customer, and they're not going to waste their time or their resources to message to those customers. In the nonprofit world, we're pretty passionate about what we do.
Definitely.
And we tend to fall in love with our missions and with our success stories, and we want to share them with the world. And sometimes you do need to share those success stories, absolutely. But the entire backstory of how you came into being and every challenge that you have, while that is keeping an ED or really anybody at the organization up at night, you need to hone down to the essentials of your story and think about what is it that the community wants to know, not what you want to tell them, but what they want to know. And that's where we see people go off rails a lot with storytelling, is they become, as an organization, very self-focused, not selfish, but self-focused in that they're so anxious to tell everything that they think is important. And it takes discipline to say, we're going to leave. You've heard the expression in the literary world about murder your darlings, kill your darlings. As a writer, you're supposed to, even if you really love a phrase, if it's not, and it's beautiful and special to you, if it's not getting the job done, you need to edit it from your copy. I can't remember who said it, but it's something I always keep in mind in writing. And you need to do the same thing when you're storytelling from an organizational standpoint too. Leave your darlings behind and focus on what is most important to your audience.
That's really hard. And I think there are many darlings in the nonprofit world. Does a nonprofit, a small or mid-sized nonprofit, really need either marketing or PR?
Definitely, they do. I think if you have a great product and nobody knows about it, you're not going to sell it. So, as they say, my son is an industrial design major, and one of the things that they challenge them to do is to think about the design and the practicality. You could have a beautiful design, but if nobody uses your product, it's art.
I go for that.
So,
I go for
yes,
that.
you definitely need both. I think it's a combination of trying to figure out what you can handle. Smaller firms obviously have less resources, but they too can get to figure out 2 or 3 contacts in the press you want to get to know and follow them on social media. Try to reach out to them, comment on their social media. Oh, I love that story. And then get to know them, however that looks like. And then you might have an idea that fits with what they cover. Start small. And then the big firms, again, can learn from the small firms.
I think that there's hardly any media anymore, any, reporters or newscasters to get to know.
Shrinking daily.
Right.
Yeah.
Or influencers, too.
Yeah, well-
they're their own category, for sure.
Yeah,
yes.
That would probably fit into this. That could be a whole other conversation, I'm sure. I think, and again, my experience here these last few years is when we talk about marketing, PR, communications, it immediately goes to socials. Has social media taken the place of newspapers, radio, and television?
They've enhanced what newspapers, radio, television does because they all have a presence, and some do it better than others, for sure. I think you're always going to have a message. You're going to have to get that message out. I think it's just another way of getting it out there. And certainly, social media can amplify, and it's inexpensive for organizations. So I think that's why there's a lot of focus on it. But you're right. The daily newspapers have shrunk. Some just are now online in certain cities. I mean, we are blessed that we still have a daily newspaper, and we should continue to support it. But it gets harder and harder to place stories that are quote unquote in print. I mean, what do you think, Rhonda?
I think that social media is obviously a very effective tool for most nonprofits. That question was settled a long time ago. Like Juliette said, it should be viewed as something that can enhance your what used to be called traditional news outlet, outreach. But I would caution any organization or really anybody who's doing business and using social to get their word out about putting too many eggs in the social basket, because some of the biggest platforms have changed to the point to where they don't offer the same ROI, especially for non-paid content, that they used to. I'm thinking specifically of Facebook and Instagram. And they are run by a giant corporation that, at the risk of sounding negative, does not care at all about your organization. And they are going to make decisions and sometimes not even communicate those decisions about their policies and operations that can tremendously affect someone who is relying heavily on social to get the word out. Think about it this way. If you're going to live somewhere, you don't want to go squat on somebody else's land, not just because it's illegal, but because you have zero control over anything. You're going to want to either own, or you're going to want to have a very, well spelled out lease agreement. And so if you are getting great engagement and outreach on social, well done. Congratulations to you. But you better make sure that if a hacker comes in and takes that Facebook page away, that you've got a backup plan. You need to be getting those followers opted in to the communications channels that you own, not that Mark Zuckerberg owns, or the communications channels that are a lot safer when it comes to cyber mischief makers being able to come in and hijack what's going on.
And especially, I mean, that's exactly right. Email marketing is still very effective.
Very viable.
Yes. Yeah. And so if that's not in your bag of tricks, you add it. I mean, Constant Contact or MailChimp or any of the newsletter platforms, that should be something that you ought to add, because those are people who will actually open your emails, read them, and then there's a call to action, whether it's to follow or you have an event or something that you want to let them know you won an award or you have a new provider or you're taking new patients or whatever it is that you're trying to do.
So the goal is to bring those people that read the material or that contact, to get them into the fold, so to speak, to get them on your newsletter email list, to get them into your database.
Definitely. It should be at least one of your goals, and a very important goal. Not only to get them opted in to your communications that we've already talked about, but to get them at your events as well, which is a place not only to engage with them face-to-face, which is the ultimate in outreach, right? But also to get them opted in. That's another opportunity when they're at a special event to get them opted in to your newsletter communications and your other communications that again, the emphasis that these are communications tactics and channels that you own as an organization, not that somebody else owns.
Let me add one more place to get your message out, and that's with your volunteers. A lot of you work for organizations where you engage with volunteers. I'll give you an example. The Stew Pot's celebrating its 50th anniversary. So we planned a Love Your Neighbor week we wanted 650 volunteers to come throughout the week to help serve the neighbors. And so we created an event to re-engage and engage people to come out. Then on Saturday, we wanted children and their parents to come out and to serve a meal to the neighbors there. And it was very, very successful, not only in terms of reconnecting people who had been involved, founders who have maybe come to an event or two before, and other people. They really were able to do that. So I think in addition to programming, the person overseeing your volunteers is really important to have those key messages as well. Your whole team should have them.
Right. I'm sure that both of you seen this during your careers, that a development director is responsible for PR and marketing and communications as well as fundraising. What should a small nonprofit focus on? Marketing or public relations? And how does one person raise money and do these other jobs?
Well, first of all, hats off and solidarity with the one person development / marketing / volunteer / turning the lights on and off solo powerhouse that is not at all uncommon in the nonprofit world. And it is tough. There's no doubt about it. But it is doable. Now, I'm not talking about the number of hours you're working and work-life balance and things like that. That's a different conversation. When I say it is doable, what I mean is being the development person, but also being the marketing and PR person, it is possible. For one thing, any development professional will tell you that marketing PR, even if they are in a very sophisticated, well-funded, large organization environment, that marketing PR is still part of their job. So there's no escaping that marketing PR is always going to be part of a development professional's work. But we're talking here about the tiny team or the solo operation. And my advice to anybody in that circumstance is to decide what is most important. And it doesn't have to be etched in stone for all eternity. It can be, this is what's most important this quarter, this year, the next couple of years, whatever your time frame is. Pick 2 or 3 things that you want to work on and just focus on doing them well. you might have to gently but firmly push back with well-meaning board members or even your CEO who wants you to try to be everything. We want to be everything to all people. And a lot of this goes back to what I was saying earlier about you are not everything to all people when in terms of telling your story. You have to narrow your audience, and you have to decide what part of your story is most compelling and most important to that audience. And it's the same thing with deciding what marketing and PR tactics you want to focus on. As Juliette was saying earlier, maybe you just pick a couple of reporters or outlets and don't worry about trying to reach everyone, just worry about trying to build a relationship with them. It might be, hey, this year we're going to work on really building up our email marketing campaign. It might be we see potential on Instagram. We're going to try to, go big or go home there. It might be we think that we've got a special event that could really be amazing if we would just focus on it, and you focus on that and throw out 3 other special events that you've been doing that aren't really bringing you the ROI.
Let me add one thing, too, that I've seen work really successfully at nonprofits. They have committees. I mean, much like the Junior League of Dallas, of which Rhonda and I are both sustainers, where you have a development committee and they're volunteers, and they may come in once a quarter, and you have the best of the best helping brainstorm. And maybe they help you out too. And you can have a marketing committee do that as well. Those board members are sure good resources for being able to head up those committees and to do some work and realize how much work you as a solo having to handle both roles have. So I think that lean on your board and those who say, oh, you should be doing that. Okay, would you like to head up my development committee?
Yes. Would you like to sounds great.
Yes.
Would you like to take that on?
I agree with that a lot. And again, I just keep thinking of my clients. They don't feel like they can ask a board member to do that job. And I said, yes, of course you can. That's why they're here.
Absolutely. And a lot of times board members would probably say, well, that's the reason why I rolled off the board, is because no one ever really asked me to do anything.
Yeah.
And of course, we're veering off into another area here, which can be a series of podcasts about board volunteer staff relationships. But it's very, very common, I think, for volunteers, committee members, board members, all of them to come on board, or just literally or figuratively, and then not really get I'm trying to find an elegant way to say be used. They're not utilized. And that's why they're there, is because they're waiting to lend their expertise or their resources. And I don't think any staff member should be afraid of asking. Of course, you've always got to understand if a board member says, I can't help for whatever reason, but I think most of the time as a staff member, you'll find that you're glad that you asked.
I would agree with that. I love a good plan for anything. And I would like for the two of you to share some examples of what should be included in a marketing or PR or communications plan, whatever it's called. What are some examples of what should be included in a plan?
Goals, objectives, tactics. Got. There's another one right there. What's your goal? What are you hoping to achieve? What are the objectives? And then the tactics are, how are you going to reach that goal? Whether it be an email newsletter, a volunteer outreach, event day, a donor cultivation. There are so many different things. Or we're going to start committees for our development marketing program committees so that they have board members. So I think that, and then in it as well, key messages and what's your call to action. So those are definitely some elements for a good plan. That would just be a regular plan. There are variations upon a theme, as we like to call it. We've been tasked to write a crisis plan, and so we were thinking of all of the crises that we could have. And if you think about it, people we create messes and we have to clean them up. And then, but that's another plan you might think of wanting to create as well as a subset of your big plan. That may be a separate plan.
So that is a really good segue to go to another question I wanted to ask you all about where we are right now. We are in really uncertain times, and this has made my clients more aware of the need to have contingency plans or a crisis plan. How can a nonprofit leader prepare to communicate effectively with their clients, donors, staff, and board if something goes terribly wrong?
You need a crisis plan. You need to know who is going to speak. And we recommend having one person, one voice, or maybe it's two people, but everyone else is not to speak. It has to have those key messages, whatever it is. You have to probably write those pretty quickly if it's a situation of which you don't have a plan. And then you immediately respond to that, because if you have a fatality, you're going to have to respond quickly, and one voice. So
I can say that is not anything that has come up, honestly, in the last 4 years with my clients. No one talks about, I say contingency plan, but crisis plan is probably even, a better term. I'll put that on my to-do list. But anyway, yes, Rhonda.
You're wise to do that. Crisis planning should be on everybody's priority list, no matter who you are. Depending on the size of your organization and the space you work in, you may not need to spend a ton of time on it, but a good crisis plan starts before there is no crisis. What's the saying? If you fail to plan, you plan to fail.
Yes.
And what I would recommend by the way, I love talking about crisis communications. Although I certainly do not derive any happiness from anybody who is, suffering or anything like that. But as far as the strategy and the challenge of when things go wrong, how do you protect your mission and your assets and your brand, I find that to be very stimulating. And I think that, and also most importantly, reassuring when you have a plan in place. What I think an ED will find or a CEO will find is that if they know what they're going to do, if something goes wrong, they're going to sleep a little better at night, and they're going to feel more sure-footed if and when, God forbid, the time comes. And what I would encourage an organization to do if they don't know where to start is think about some organizations who have been so unfortunate as to have in their space, or even in a related space, who have been so unfortunate as to have a crisis that made the news or made the rounds within their industry news, and use that as a starting point for discussion. Say, what would we have done if this was us? How do we think sometimes you don't know exactly how something was handled. You just know the end result, which was a statement in a news story or something like that. But you can go through the exercise of how do we think that how and why do we think they made certain decisions? What would we have done differently? What lessons can this organization's experiences teach us? And you can use that as the basis for your plan.
Another good segue. So an executive director or CEO, as we've just said, oftentimes, of course, they're the face of the organization. And just as often, I've seen them not prepared when speaking publicly or even to a donor. They come across as nervous or verbose. How have you all helped leaders in these situations become better communicators?
Media training. We highly recommend media training for anybody who needs to speak to everyone you just mentioned, whether it's a reporter, a donor, a potential donor, an audience. You need media training, and not just you did the media training, check the box. But the other thing that we tell clients to do is rehearse in front of a mirror. If you're on TV, you're going to smile more because otherwise you look really mean. And even if you're doing an interview for radio, smile because that comes across genuine, of course. But yeah, media training and rehearsing.
And again, knowing your story and that not everything needs to be in your story. That's what leads to verbosity.
I guess that's part of the media training.
Media training and just good old, you don't even have to be that fancy about it. If you just want to call it good old-fashioned rehearsing, then you'll be set. The more you practice, the more confident you feel, and the more fine-tuned your story is, the better it's going to convey.
My dad often said this to us as kids, and he said, proper planning prevents poor performance.
Ooh, that's good. That's a good one. I would like you all to share some of your stories, which I'm sure you have many, of clients or employers, of course, without naming any names, of an effective relationship between communications department and fundraising department, or one that was really terrible.
We have a good one.
We do.
Yes. I think
we love them so much we wish we could say their name, but we won't.
Yes. We helped this client so much, and they were launching a new program. Lots of press. We did a lot of public relations, media relations, worked with their marketing communications team on their ad buys and other things as well. With that came a major gift of $1 million. Yes, it was something that those kinds of stories just don't happen every day, but I think the concerted effort and this program is really making a difference in the lives of many. And so I think that that's a really good story we can share.
Yes, and in this example that Juliette is talking about, the development team is stellar when it comes to storytelling and in understanding that it's a partnership between development and PR. And then also in this particular example, the Marcom department is very skillful at bringing different teams within the organization together for the benefit of promoting said program or their organization's overall mission. So again, this particular anecdote is highlighting a lot of the things that we've been talking about the unity among the teams, the need for effective storytelling, the need for rehearsal that has everyone on the same page about their messages, and we love it when a plan comes together.
We love it. And also the donor cultivation. It was the perfect donor and it's a female donor who it spoke to her on many levels. And so it was perfect.
All right. So I've got it, but that's wonderful. And
yes.
I love a good story, but I want one that's like they went off the rails or you couldn't help them or they're out of business now. I don't know. What's a story that didn't work so well?
Well, this is sad to mention, but the Women's Museum at Fair Park. Okay, I worked on that for 2 years with Rita Cox and a couple of other people. In fact, I was leaving Rita's organization, but she asked me, and going out on my own, but she asked me to continue working on that because I was pregnant. So in between, I had a baby who's now 25, almost 26. And it was very successful. When we opened it, we had so many people who were involved and excited about it. But then we turned it back over, and you have to run the museum. You have to raise money. You have to do all the things, the programming. And the museum didn't have I don't know, they no longer, they have the buildings still at Fair Park, but they are no longer in business. I mean, I don't know how they folded. And that is a sad, that's a sad kind of mark in my book. So.
Yeah, I remember at that opening and it was so exciting and the exhibits were great. It was good that it was at Fair Park. I don't know what happened because I was never really involved with it, but it just kind of faded away, which was really kind of sad. Who knows if something like that can come back again?
Right.
I don't know.
I'm hoping that,
Yeah.
again, perhaps somebody, if somebody can champion something like that and then get people really excited about it, raise the funds. But there are instances where just because it's a great idea, it doesn't mean that it's sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
So,
let's switch focus a little bit. We've focused on the nonprofit sector and the basics of communications. Tell us about the future. Where does AI fit in, which is not the future anymore, it's here? And then what's next?
I use AI for research, some outlines, different tips, but it's never going to replace humanity. And we even have colleagues who use AI to write their press releases, and then they edit them up. And sure, but then where do you send it? Where are your relationships? So it's never going to replace a human for sure, because I think we're very creative. What do you think, Rhonda?
AI is a very complicated talk. Like, I felt my blood pressure go up when you started the question, because my personal feelings are, please God, can we put the Pandora back in her box? But we can't. AI is here, so I have made myself start becoming familiar with the tool, and there's no question that AI can be very helpful in the nonprofit world in terms of your marketing communications and your PR. But anyone who thinks that they can just type in, write a media release for me, and they're done is not heading down the right path. That we are not there yet. You could use it to help you maybe come up with phrasing if you're thinking, I can't say innovative one more time in this press release, but yet I need to say innovative one more time. And that's, you ask your AI assistant, can you help me think of another way to phrase this? I sometimes use it for proofreading, especially if you're working as an individual contributor and you don't always have another set of eyes. AI can be enormously helpful. But it's as Juliette said, it's not going to replace a human. And I think you will, if you're overly relying on AI, it do so at your peril, because for one thing, AI can make mistakes. That's huge right there. And secondly, your voice will start to sound like a computer, like a robot, your brand voice, if you don't use AI wisely. To answer the other part of your question about what else is coming down the road, well, when Juliette and I figured that out, we're going to start a new part of our business and make millions and millions of dollars. And
We
call
will.
it PR fortune telling.
Exactly.
I think, honestly, I don't know. I'd have to think about that, and I still might not really have an answer. So my advice to anybody in the PR and marketing world in nonprofit is to, as the saying goes, keep calm and carry on. Try not to worry every time you hear about a new trend or that, someone declaring that something's obsolete, and you trust your own instincts. Be, very respectful about enthusiastic volunteers that may come to you and say, we need to be on the following social media platform that just came out yesterday, and I think it's going to be great. And, say, well, maybe you may be right about that. Can you maybe tell me why you think that? Would you care to maybe do a little research and then let's talk again? But don't be afraid to push back if that's not the right step for you, or it maybe is the right step, but you don't have the bandwidth to go forward. I think that engaging in education, attend CEOs, let your staff go to conferences. I know it's hard to justify the money sometimes or the time away from the office, but those conferences and professional associations those are really good places to find out more about what the trends are, and also to build a supportive network of colleagues that you can turn to for advice, particularly if you're a small team or you're a solo powerhouse.
Good advice. And speaking of advice, again, another great segue. Thank you. What advice would you give someone who is just beginning their career in the field of public relations and marketing?
That's a great question. And it's funny. It must be the season for resumes and calls because I have gotten so many from those graduating. And so don't be ready to do anything. If making copies and pasting up clips, that was actually what one of my first jobs at Fleischman Hillard was, doing that, do it, and do it with a smile on your face. Be ready to ask questions because you don't know if you don't ask. Read everything about your industry. I mean, read the newspaper, read online, know about your clients, know about their competitors. That's so important because the more you know, the more valuable you'll be. Pick up the phone and talk to people, actually.
Actually talk to people.
Yes,
Oh,
actually
no.
talk to people because sometimes
That's
you can
radical, Juliette.
I know, you can send an email, but if the person is next door, get up and go and talk to them and have a 5-minute conversation. And so anyhow, look for ways to connect with both your colleagues, your those in leadership, and also with the press. If you're in media relations, or if you, I mean, like Rhonda said too, just find something that's business related. If you are in marketing, maybe join American Marketing Association or PRSA or one of the groups so that you always are knowing what's going on and subscribe to their newsletters. And then network. You're only as good as your network. So, and I'm glad y'all are in my network.
So as we wind up here, the last question I like to ask my guests is, what is the one thing you want our listeners to remember from our conversation?
Well, I would say how fabulous Juliette and I are. That's really
right. Okay,
That should be the main takeaway.
That's the main one. I would agree with that.
I think that your story is your story. So figure out what it is you want to tell your various audiences and stick with it. Make it simple.
I was kidding, of course, about how fabulous we are.
But we agree.
What I would want people to remember is goes back to something I said earlier, that PR it's about your relationships with your audiences, and news stories are a way to build those relationships, but it's not the only tool in your box. That you should think of PR primarily as cultivating, making new friends, and then making those friendships as positive and rewarding for both sides as possible, and then sustaining them over the long haul.
It sounds like what fundraisers do with donors.
Yes,
Absolutely.
it is. It's
Yes.
very similar.
Yes,
Yes.
You're so right.
Well, thank you both very much for being with us today. I really appreciate you being on the podcast and sharing your wealth of knowledge and information and expertise. Thank you both.
Thank you so much, Diana.
We are so glad to be here, Diana. Thank you for having us. And to all your listeners, keep going. Your mission matters. You're making a difference.
Thanks.